This week I started a comprehensive program with my toddler slash preschooler daughter. Over the past few months, I've been feeling that I really hadn't been challenging my daughter in our daily activities since the arrival of my son. So I decided to start a comprehensive preschooling at home program with my now 3-year-old. I found this a very simple program that is called Playing Preschool at Home. You need very few resources to complete the activities that are really laid out for you in a super easy format. It's very easy to follow, and it's a very flexible program, so if you don't have all the resources that are required at hand, you can easily sub in for something that you have lying around the house. There's 19 units in this whole program that will complete one school year. So if you're feeling like you need to do something a little more in your daily activities with your child, this would be a great program for you, and maybe you can follow along with us. Our first unit was on apples. For this unit, you're simply going to need about a dozen apples with a variety of flavors and colors, some red, yellow, and green paint, perhaps some red, yellow, and green construction paper. There are a couple of books suggested for this unit. I was unable to obtain these books through our local library, so I managed to find a really good book on Amazon Kindle, and I also had to resort to just listening to somebody read a book online when it came to the Dr. Seuss's 10 Apples Up on Top. This also brought in a new activity for us of reading books online. It's something that we've never done before, so that was a little exciting too, and I found that Nola really liked it. Now I will say that my daughter is just turned 3 years old last week, and like most kids, she's super smart and she's just a sponge and absorbing everything we can. I wanted to have a little more structure into the activities that we do throughout the day. This program is very, very easy. All in all, it takes maybe 45 to 60 minutes a day, but you can easily break it up into little chunks where you can find a little bit of time here and there to complete everything that's planned out for the day. Monday, we started out with apples, a poem and a song that was provided in this program. So to start the day and to get the attention of my daughter, I simply just placed a bowl of apples on the table. So right off the bat, we were into the apples already, so we started sorting them. I had some construction paper of red, yellow, and green. We laid them out on the table, and right away we started sorting them by color. And then we started counting how many we had of each color. We started counting how many we had all together. And this is where the variety of apples comes into play. And then after we had done some counting, we started sorting by ones that had stickers and ones that had stems, and that ended in eating some of the apples. Later on that day, we sliced some of these apples open and started doing our apple stamps. So we already had an easel and some white painting paper rolls that are always on this easel. So I just let her kind of do her own thing. I helped her out a little bit to get the paint onto the apple, but I just let her stamp away. After that, we brought our painting upstairs and cut out some of these apple stamps to make cards for our little apple poem. And we put one of the stamps inside so that she could see it. And we did the same thing for the apple song. And this would just help us hold on to these things a little bit better. And my girl, she loves books, so turning it into these little cards made it kind of like a little book. And she carried them around with her quite a bit throughout that day. Then we went on to reading a book online. This one was called How Apples Grow by Jill McDonald. I was able to find it on the Amazon Echo, and it was really, really great. So like I said, my daughter and I have never read books online before, so she really enjoyed going to the computer to read these storybooks, and I let her press the little arrow keys on the keyboard so that she was turning the page, so to speak. And this was a really, really good book for her age. She really understood what was in the book. We did a walkthrough of the book first, just looking at the pictures and talking about what we thought was going to happen before we actually read it, and we read it many, many times that day. For Tuesday, we're going to do a lot of sorting again. The only supplies that you're going to need for this day are masking tape, a flashlight. Optional things are stickers, or letter A stickers, and a crayon and some paper. And we simply reread the same book again today by Jill McDonald called How Apples Grow. Again, I left the bowl of apples on the table, and I had already had a placemat set up with the 5 different squares mapped out with masking tape. And this time we were simply counting to 5 first, which my daughter has no problem counting to 5, but putting the items in a particular square and then counting up, she seemed to enjoy that, and it worked quite well. After we counted out 5 apples, now I will say I put these particular 5 apples into the bowl, and they were all varying in sizes because I knew that the next sorting activity we were going to do was by size. So I wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of difference in the size of the apples, as they can tend to be rather similar in size. She got through this activity no problem. She really enjoyed it. And we did a little more sorting as well with this activity. She just, once you start something like this, she just has many ideas of how else we can sort them and what we can do with them. And I just let her natural flow of this carry on throughout whatever activity that we're doing. And of course, the apple activities always end with her eating an apple when we're done. After we did the sorting, we read through the book again. Once we were done with the book, we started our letter A hunt. So this is where you're going to take a flashlight and look around the house and find the letter A. You can start within the book itself, but we didn't stay there for very long. She wanted to go around the whole house and start looking for letter A's. So that's what we did. We took little flashlights and we went all over the house, and we discovered different types of A's. You have capital A's and small A's, and those funny A's with the little hook on the top that you see a lot. After she was done hunting for the letter A around the house, she wanted to get out her sticker book and peel off the letter A and stuck them all over her poem and song little cards that we made, which I thought was just another great activity to get to the letter A. We also drew the letter A across the bottom of her coloring book when she was coloring later that day. So of course I was helping her. She really doesn't have the motor skills and control to draw the letter A herself, so she just sits in my lap and picked a color, and we drew the letter A across 4 or 5 pages of her coloring book, and then proceeded onto the stickers and stuck them on her card poem and her card song. And we sang those songs and poems probably 10 times each while we did that. It was a lot of fun. For Wednesday, I didn't really film much. It was much of the same thing that we had already done on Tuesday. Just the natural progression of our sorting activities led into the sorting activities that we were supposed to do on Wednesday, which was sorting by size, and by sticker, no sticker, stem, no stem, any way you want to sort them, you really can, and counting using our little placemat that I had made up with the 5 different squares. We also started reading a new book on Wednesday, which is 10 Apples Up on Top by Dr. Seuss. Again, I didn't have this book on hand and I couldn't get it from my local library, so I just went on YouTube and I found a really good video where it's just a video of the storybook and it flips through the pages on their own, and it's read for you. And this was, again, a new way for us to experience a book, but my daughter seemed to enjoy it quite a bit as we watched it probably 15 times that day, so it was a success, I would say. The activity for 10 Apples Up on Top was to draw a quick picture of your child and then have them get into the paints again and use their finger and use their fingerprint to dab 10 apples up on top of their head as they do in the book. And my daughter, she wanted to draw everybody, so we had herself and her little brother and myself and her granny in that picture too. And she only ended up drawing about 5 or 6 apples on everybody's head, but all in total, she had over 10 apples altogether. And like I said, I wasn't pushing it. That was as much as that she wanted to do. I left her easel up, and she did eventually go back and do a couple more little dots of apples up on top of the heads. But it was a really cute, fun, and easy activity to do. And if you really, the drawing, they're basically stick people that we drew, but if you don't even want to do that, you could just take a picture of your kid and stick it on the paper and let them put the apples up on top of their head within their picture on their painting. While we were painting the 10 apples up on top, we were talking a lot about what we learned in the book How Apples Grow by Jill McDonald, and it takes you through the whole process from seed till picking apple season in fall. And she knew all of the steps with very little help from me and very little prompting. This is something that we do periodically throughout the day, whether we're eating apples or we start talking about apples again. I'll just kind of give her little quiz questions here and there of, what does an apple start out as, or what season do we pick apples in, and what colors can apples be, and stuff like that, just to see if she is retaining any of the information that she's reading, which 100% all of it is there. So on Thursday, she wanted to draw the letter A again, so I just had her up in my lap. We grabbed a piece of paper and she picked some colors. This was after we had already read her poem and her song, and we drew out rows of the letter A over and over again. And then she wanted to draw an apple, so we picked out the colors for that, and I had her tell me the parts of the apple that she wanted me to draw. She started with the seed and went up through there to the core, and then the flesh, we didn't really draw the flesh as it is a white color, so we just left that kind of to the paper. But her favorite flavor that day was Red Delicious, so she picked red for the skin of the apple, which we drew. And she didn't forget about the stem, and she didn't forget about the little leaf on top either. And this was a really fun activity. She's been into this lately, even before we started this program, where she'll ask me to draw particular things instead of just senselessly scribbling on a page as she normally does. So she's really starting to pay attention and wanting to draw particular things. So this was a really good activity. And again, it was 100% her idea. And then she wanted to write the word apple at the bottom of the page after we had drawn this apple. This was a super fun and really, really easy activity, and afterwards we just got out some masking tape and I hung up her letter A and her apple drawings right above her page. So she went back to her 10 on top apple painting activity on Thursday today when we went down to do our next activity. So again, I was just kind of directing her onto where to put the apples to keep stacking them up as much as she could. I gave her help when she was asking me for help because she wanted them to be in a really straight row like they are in the book, and she was having a little bit of troubles with her aim. So like I said, I let her do what she wanted to do, and I helped her only when she asked me for help. And then when I knew she was done, because she really doesn't like to keep messy hands for long, we just started counting the apples. We went on to apple stamping then, and I was trying to get her to do rows of 5. So I started for her, and again, I was helping where it was needed and when she wanted my help, and other than that, I was just letting her stamp. Now these are the apples that we kept from Monday's activity. I kept the apple halves, I kept the paint trays. I would suggest slicing off the outer piece of the apple to have a fresh piece to start with, because by today they were quite dried up and it was hard to get a good stamp. And after this, she just wanted to do some hand painting on the paper, which was completely fine with me, because she doesn't do stuff like that very often. She doesn't like to be too messy. So the paint was there, everything was already set up, so I just let her go ahead with her hand stamps, and she was painting her hands like apples, she said. Friday morning, as we ate apples for breakfast, as we did most days this week, we just talked about how apples grow and what our favorite flavors of apples were and the colors of apples, and just the whole process of taking an apple seed and how it turns into a seedling and a sapling and a tree and flowers and then apples, and she really enjoys explaining this process to me. Today's activity was to talk about the shape of apples and then to go look around the house and try to collect things that were similar to the shape of apples. She wasn't really into this. At first she was excited, and then she lost interest very quickly. It took a few times throughout the day for her to collect a very few items, but when she got going, she grabbed a few items, stuck them in her bag, brought them over to me, and she did pretty good. She brought me everything that was round and could be big apples or little apples, and she was done with that. The next activity for the day was an applesauce sensory bin. I was a little bit kind of didn't want to do this one because, applesauce can be really messy. But again, my daughter doesn't like to be very messy. I mean, this girl does not like crumbs on her hands while she's eating toast. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. We dumped a jar of applesauce into a container. I had a scoop for her. I had a little pouring jar and some straws, and all she wanted to do was slurp the applesauce out of the container with the straw, and I was totally okay with that. I encouraged her a few times to put her hands in and mix it around and squish it and feel it, but she really had zero interest in doing that. So I just let her do her, and she went back and forth from straw to straw, and she really enjoyed slurping up a lot of applesauce out of this container, which I really enjoyed how not messy this was. So while she was slurping through the applesauce, we talked about how you make applesauce and how even though you can use different types of apples, the flavor generally turns out the same, but you can change it up a little bit by using different flavors of apples, and we may possibly make some applesauce next week. So that was it. That was the whole week. It's super, super simple, this program to follow. It's very easy to make do with what you have. You know, if you didn't say have colored construction paper for Monday, you could use anything that is red, yellow, or green. You could use a t-shirt, a towel, a placemat, a bowl. You could even just plop a crayon down, have them place the apple next to the coordinating color. I found that because the activities were so simple, they could take 2 minutes or they could take 20 minutes, depending on how interested your child was in that particular activity. And going back and repeating some of the same things throughout the week really proved to be effective. After a few days, my daughter could really explain to me how apples grow from little seedlings up until they're ready to be harvested. And she learned a lot about things she already knew, like the letter A, but we looked for them in totally different ways. Hunting around the house for a letter A with a flashlight, I thought was a brilliant idea. She really, really enjoyed that one. We did it many times throughout the day and throughout the week for that matter. And it was a really good way to keep her engaged on something that we normally talk about anyways, but we typically do it with more of sandpaper letters or flashcards. We focus mostly on the phonetic sounds of letters more than the actual letters themselves. She very quickly picked up on the different types of the letter A, as in a capital A or the actual typed A where it has that little hook on top, and was easily able to identify all three of those A's within the little poem that we had and we had been reading. After we had done that activity, she pointed out that all three different A's sat there within that poem. So that was it for this week. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to maybe follow along and try some of these preschooling at-home activities with your kid, then consider subscribing. Thanks.